Welcome to the SPL Rundown, your weekly look at the Smite Pro League. I'm your host, Apam. Joined by a special guest this week, we have the coach of the Renegades, Rowe, with us, along with the usual suspects here, Wraith and Frost. Check out my interview with Rongyu, the support from Sanguine, a little bit later on. But first, Smite action is back after the bye week, and I guess a bunch of unexpected results this week. So let's start with maybe the start of all this unexpected results, which is Obey versus Radiance. And I gotta just say, this is a huge win for the Obey boys to beat Radiance. I know Radiance is maybe coming off not scrimming too much in the wake of COVID in their team, but you know, what are you guys' thoughts on Obey finally getting a big win this week?
I think well deserved. Honestly, they've been working hard. They're one of the teams that just double scrims pretty much any chance they can get. Climbing the way up from the bottom of the ladder. You know, if anyone deserves it, you got to say it's them. They've made that roster change after phase one. They've been grinding ever since. So a big win for them is a big morale boost, I'm sure.
Sure.
Big win. What about the other wins that they get? Were those minor in comparison, or what are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, Radiance was top of the block
Yeah, they were top of
the whole break. So I think this is the biggest one yet. Obviously, they had the break, so that plays into it a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say big. Sure. Big on paper for sure, but that level of improvement is nuts. Even from phase one, where I was saying this is going to come down to Bobby. It's going to come down to Bobby's growth as a player into that three-man fighting in the middle, into how he kind of leads and initiates or disengages in the fights later on. And he's got his confidence. I'd say his confidence back up, because he said at the beginning he was kind of nervous. I think he's definitely come through for him.
Yeah, he had a lot to prove, so I can understand the nerves, but he's coming into form, so it's good to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially the last couple weeks, he's looked at least not like detrimental to the team and been like part of the squad. Hey, I mean, true. there were some games early on, where
there were
there were a couple. I mean, they got to the point we talked about it past weeks, right? It got to the point where they put him on the most mobile thing that they could, because he was just out of position constantly, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but
there's an art to it as a support.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, you're either in position or you're way out of position, and there's no in between.
Yeah.
But no, I was really happy to see this. I will say Bobby's been working out with me like 4 times a week. They start getting better. I'm not taking credit. No, but
where's your Smite win? So
yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I'm rubbing off on him all my glorious Smite plays. But no, I honestly I've been a big believer in these guys since the beginning of last year, right? And kind of watching them, because the core is really still there, or not quite the core, but Wowie, Ducky, Bobby.
The foundation, at least, not the core.
Yeah, they've been around, and I've watched them grow last year, and not really come up. Besides the big set, it kind of came up empty-handed. The first half of this year, they had a lot of games where they were just absolutely blowing other teams out of the water, and then they just hard through, or the set didn't really reflect the way that they played, where they get 2-0'd, but they were close games. And now to see them kind of finally turn it on. And I hate making excuses for it, but it does suck that Radiance weren't able to practice for 3 weeks. But I don't think a team like that goes from winning most of their games against the top ranked teams to not, just because you haven't had a good scrim in a while, right? I mean, Cyclone could take 6 months off and come back to the game, and he'd still be nuts at it, right?
That's right. Yeah, I do think they'll bounce back, but yeah, they're definitely a little bit weaker now than what they should be. But that, I don't think it takes them away.
Not being able to scrim because of COVID kind of sucks. But I think it's a cheap way to take that win away from Obey, because they looked absolutely top of form.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. I thought Radiance played well. I don't think they were just falling all over themselves to the point where they threw the games. It wasn't like they played terribly. Obey just played better.
Game 1, for an example, I thought Obey were just going to run away with it, but they held strong. And I've had a lot of long games against Radiance, and they can defend so well. And if they needed practice, if they needed warm-up time, it was game 1. They had what was it, 50-something minutes?
Yeah, 53 minutes.
All the warm-up you could ever want.
Yeah, no kidding.
But we've seen what happens to Benji after he has a long game, though. His brain just melts after that, dies to back camps.
That's every solo laner.
Yeah.
It starts to melt from minute 1 as a solo laner, so it's you're on a ticking time bomb.
Sure. I just have in my notes here that it was like a big game from Wolfie. I think Wolfie's really started coming into his own as a mid laner in this league, and definitely shooken off the rust, especially from his year-long hiatus. I'm sure that rust was a little bit visible in phase 1, but right now he's looking really good, and he's really impressed me. What are you guys' thoughts about Wolfie so far?
First off, I was fighting people. When he got back on, and they're like, "There's no way he's been gone for so long." He was not the reason that Rival did so well. He was the reason that Rival was being held back. But I'm like, no, this right here is by far like top 2 mid laners easily. And his raw still nutty. He does his raw snipes all the time. He doesn't need the setup. He can use it, but he doesn't need it. I don't know. I don't know what he does. I don't know how he trains. I don't know that mentality. Something about him. This boy's spectacular.
I would say he's got the best raw in the league, and he probably has for a couple of years now. Like maybe we can't really count last year, but before that, he was definitely in that conversation. And for him to bring raw back into the meta before he was buffed says a lot.
Yeah. I think Wolfie's always been, at least in the time that I've been watching, like Wolfie excels in metas where it's down to that one big mage ultimate, right? Fire Giant jokes aside, right? When it's Oth or Raw or so, like something where it's like that is the one ability that you are counting on to win a team fight. Like that's when Wolfie comes through, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's this like Merlin, even a Raijin, I think is kind of boring, right? Like, yeah, it's a big team fight ult, but it's a boring ability and it's a boring god. But like the big like highlight play ults, when Wolfie's not a god that does that, he shines through and he does it really, really well with the raw. I absolutely fucking hate the contagion that he builds every game. But
I thought it was some of the game.
But no, I thought he did a fantastic job.
Sure.
It's important to like have him in that conversation as well, because when it was Rival, like with Ice Baby and everything, it was like, well, maybe Ice Baby is just a good setup guy. Like he was a good jungler, like carry jungler, like adapting as well. But he was also like the half setup guy. But I mean, now Wolfie's just hitting blind snipes anyway. He doesn't need the setup. So I think he gets 90% of the credit for sure when it comes to like his plays.
I feel like Wolfie's like kind of hot and cold though, because not to jump too far ahead, but you look at the United set, and I mean, it was like he went from being absolutely man on fire against one of the best teams in the league to, I mean, he was a negligible impact in the United set. Actually, I thought he played very underwhelmingly.
All right,
well, it comes down to his picks.
Sure.
I think so too.
Let's save that for when we talk about that set. Are there anything I missed for this set? Any final thoughts you guys might have about Obey versus Radiance?
Other than the point that I think they honestly could have 3-0'd them if it were a best of 5. Like I think they could have won that first game for sure. I think they just played or maybe panicked the late game a little bit. So I don't know. It was just impressive all around. And yeah, you can give some forgiveness to Radiance because of the whole situation, but how much can we really say? We don't know what was happening behind the scenes, and they played great.
Sure.
So.
I think it's also a consequence of that Radiance playstyle. It's very sort of a high risk and very, very high reward, but you all have to be together on it, on the same plan. And if you misstep, that's going to just start tumbling, because they had moments where they looked really sloppy, but it wasn't all like, okay, I can pinpoint this to being one player just consistently playing poorly. It was just sort of like the 1 step off here, 2 steps off here. Maybe this one's going 3 steps a little too far from where he should be forward in the plan, and it just kind of it bit them here and there.
The important note is that like you wouldn't normally expect, at least 4 or 5 weeks ago, you wouldn't expect Obey to capitalize on those mistakes, but on this.
Yeah, that is for sure. But I was kind of messing with them, saying like, is X team doing poorly enough for Obey to take a win, as opposed to has Obey improved enough to take a win?
Right.
I think they've sort of joined the conversation for the league now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that frustrates me the most about just like the Smite scene in general, is that the second that somebody plays well, everybody looks to try and figure out like why the other team played poorly, not like whether or not this team is doing well
as often as they should.
No, not at all. But my theory on game 1 versus Radiance though is this is kind of funny. And I asked Bobby about this and he didn't say anything, so I'm wondering if it's a yes. Is my theory was they got super excited about the fact that they were about to take one off Radiance, that they threw it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I described that as like kind of a panic kind of situation. And
Yeah,
that's
like
what
holy
happens
shit, we're
when
gonna
you
win.
get too excited. Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they went in with. It seemed like okay. I wasn't expecting to get this far because we're going where they're sieging Phoenixes like 2-3 times in a row, but they got to the point where you go, okay, maybe sell the sieging items for more of like end fight items, because the way you're playing is as if you think that this is going to go on forever, but eventually you are going to get wiped, and there's enough time on the death timers to where they just walk down and end it as they did.
Yeah. I mean, once it gets to 45, even 40 minutes, it becomes a 50-50. Whoever wins that big team fight wins.
Sure. All right, then.
They've done that a couple of times. I mean, you don't even have to throw this in, but just a final comment. Like, they did it a couple of times during the year, right? Where they were about to take games off of SSG, and then they threw. Right? Same thing. It's like, oh my God, we're gonna win. We're gonna win. You know, we talked about it in earlier weeks. That was one reason I kept voting for them.
But that was like they jumped the gun. This one was they kept their foot on their neck the entire time until eventually they slipped, and at that point, death timers punished you back.
Yeah.
All right, then. Moving on to, I guess, another unexpected result this week, which was E United versus Sanguine, and we see E United win this game, also win this set, also in 3 games. I guess the first thing we really have to talk about here is the brand new roster for E United. Did you guys expect them to sort of show up against a top 4 team like this right away?
I think I did. I think every team's going to have such a big honeymoon phase. I think they brought in, obviously, Baskin, you can say he's a superstar, whatever. I think Gino's a solid player as well, but I think more importantly, they just brought in the structure that they needed. So they should have good results early, and they did. We'll see how much of that is the honeymoon phase and things like that. I don't know how much they're practicing, which could hurt them a little bit just because they have school, but I think I think some of them are really intelligent players, like Baskin especially, and then good players as well. And that's a great mix when it comes to the right structure and the right, I guess structure is just the main word. It's like just behind the scenes and how they work as a team. I think that's where their practice will be really efficient. And I think they had like 1.5, maybe 2 weeks of practice leading up to the Sanguine game before the roster change, or like, after the roster change, sorry. So they were well prepared for sure.
Yeah, I went back and I changed my vote. We had a discussion on Monday, and I knew what the changes were likely to be. Nothing was publicly confirmed yet when I voted last week, but reading like Herwin's tweet longer about why they did what they did, where they felt they were weak, what they felt like the new players brought. Like normally you just get a roster change, you're like, oh, they're just trying something different, but like hearing the logic behind why they made the changes that they did was very compelling, which is why I switched my vote.
Sure.
And then also hearing on top of that Sanguine took the bye week as a vacation. They took the week off. They didn't scrim. Biggie talked about it the last time we were on, that it would, he thought the exact same thing, right? He said, I think they may actually end up looking weaker out of this bye round because, a lot of teams are taking breaks, or some teams are taking breaks, and they're one of them. And after hearing that and then hearing the reasoning behind the United changes, I was like, damn, like they're going to come out swinging. Sure. I was excited to see him do it. It's always good to see Baskin back in the league, but
yeah, of course.
I did not think that Sanguine played particularly well. Again, it's not to take anything away from United, but I think we didn't see a lot of the Sanguine that we typically do. And I think that hurts, and whether it's the practice or United just taking it to them and they were caught flat-footed, but that was my second favorite set of the day.
Yeah,
the weekend, really.
I was gonna say there was only 2 sets that day.
Yeah, I know that was the joke, but
oh, okay.
There you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the break, like just talking about the break quickly that Sanguine might have took.
Sure.
I don't know if it's confirmed or what, but I mean, those things typically are for the long term anyway. Like if they feel like they're going to get burnt out towards, the later end of the split where playoffs start to come up, and that's really important to secure. And if they want to play the long game and like avoid that burnout and make sure they have a really strong playoffs, then more power to them. It would hurt them in the short run, but again, it's like the Obey Radiance situation. I don't think it takes much away from United. I think they won the game because they played better, and then I think they picked better as well. And I will say that it was really entertaining to see the Twitch chat and things like that after game 1, because is like as soon as one game's over, like people don't remember that it's a best of 3, right? They're just talking smack as soon as that one game's over, and it's just like we'll just wait and see. You can talk smack after, say anything you want in the Reddit comments, whatever. But after one game, just chill.
Sure.
Yeah, I like the little. It was a little shit talk before the game too, right?
Yeah.
Or no, was that the Knights game or was it the?
It's always that one guy too.
Was it the Knights game or was it the United game where Rongi was like, "Oh, this is gonna be an easy set."
It was the Knights game. He said we beat PK every time. That's what he said.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Never mind. I'm getting my games mixed up.
Sure.
Sanguine going 0 for 2 on the weekend was a big surprise. I don't know. Pam, maybe you ask Rongi this, but rumor has it that they haven't exactly been taking advantage of their scrim sets as much as they should. Yeah.
Well,
so when you get to interview him,
I'll see what he says. I will ask him about that for sure.
That's what the word on the street is that they either skip scrims or they show up late or they schedule them
during SPL matches.
So. Yeah, right.
During an SPL match.
My sources will remain anonymous, but it'd be interesting to get his take on that because that's they're getting a bit of a reputation from what I hear.
Frost, I just wanted to maybe get your take on the debut for this new roster for United.
So see on the debut, and then also have a point to make about just the season.
Sure.
Like in particular right now, but for this one, I am like the biggest Baskin fanboy. If there's anyone thinking Baskin is the faker of Smite, that's usually me shouting it from the tallest building I can find. First game, it was sort of like I'm always keeping my eye on the support because I feel like the teams are going to be as strong as their supports are. Gino to me looked a little rigid coming off of that one.
Mm-hmm.
Sanguine did their thing where they just kind of take a fight. They play well together. All right, you go for it. I think they started getting a little more fast and loose in the second one, but I could sense like a sort of panic, and they went into their, okay, just pick your best gods. Like that match was just iconic. You got Snoopy on Rom. I'm pretty sure Gino's known for Kazumbo in the SML. Yanis and Hurrywind.
Mm-hmm.
Bastet, Scream. He won Worlds on that.
Sure.
Cerberus with Baskin. I'm pretty sure he's kind of also taken that one. Like the boy plays so many things that it's just all iconic for him. And that's when it went, okay, we're not playing the team fight game anymore. Poor, who was it? Shinto was just getting sniped over and over and over again. And I think that one win there sort of relaxed him just enough going into the third game, but it was also falling apart at the start. If I can get that time. In the middle of that set, they were diving, I want to say like around 14 minutes, they were diving tier 1.
Mm-hmm.
They were heading in, and then they all just stopped in their tracks with Baskin at the forefront. This was United. They were the ones going to dive, but then they just stopped immediately. And it felt like this is why they brought in Baskin, be a voice, to be a leader. It felt like I could hear the comms that weren't even playing and him just going, no, we're not doing this. And they buggered off to do who knows what else there. Now that they have a leader against the top team, that kind of worries me a little bit because he sort of guides from, like, in football it's referred to as a watch the hips. You can get juked out because they'll fake you out with where their head is, where their shoulders are, but their hips are going to go where they're going to go. So it's a sort of what teams are going to be able to deal with Baskin's shot calling and what teams are going to be able to go, okay, just figure out where Baskin's headed. That's where the rest of the team's going. He's almost like projecting their calls out. But he does have that. He has filled that role of being a leader.
Sure. I know Rowe mentioned the structure that this change brought. And I recall listening to Hurrywind. I think he did an interview with maybe either Finch or Gore recently for the Smite Pro YouTube. And he said that, one of the other things, especially what Frost is known here with Baskin sort of like leading the charge in sort of shot calling and things like that, is it sort of reins in the big brainness of Scream a little bit. Sometimes Scream can be a little too five-head for his own good and for the team's own good. Do you think that that's something that we're going to keep seeing here with Baskin sort of like Frost said, maybe leading the charge a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some players that are just like that, right? Some players that want to try so many. Ven's a little bit one, like for me, our team.
Mm-hmm.
Some players just want to try so many different things, and you just got to keep a leash on them a little bit. But sometimes you let them run, and maybe they discover something gold, you know.
Sure.
And I think Scream's good at that. You know, he'll every now and then bring a build or a god into the meta that you wouldn't have expected. But it's the in-game plays that Baskin, I think, is going to help with a lot. Like, because if Scream's going for those dives that he shouldn't be, you're right. Baskin will be the one that's saying, like, yo, don't go for this and things like that. And that is,
what are you doing?
as per Heroine's Twitter, that's exactly what they needed, right? In their front line. So good fit for them, and obviously worked out pretty well for them. I think a point I wanted to make between, and I'll touch a little bit on this as well when it comes to our set. Like game 1, game 2, game 1 they lose to Sanguine. Game 2 they beat them, and with a very similar comp as well. I think they traded out like their mid jungler, and that's it. But that just shows, and they played it like Sanguine played a similar comp as well, and that just shows.
They just traded out their hunter.
Yeah, even though they lose first game, they're still willing to run it back because they're like, hey, we lost that game for these reasons. Like, I'm confident in our picks, our strategy. We just need to like change up this one thing, this little. Yeah, so like they changed from like Isis something to Yanis Bastet, I think. And Yanis Bastet is so much more united. That's the one thing they needed to get that win. Sure. And then game 3 doesn't really relate to that at all. But like after losing game 1 and then just tweaking a tiny bit, that shows a lot of confidence in their strategy originally. And just running a back game 2 and getting the win that time. So that was the most impressive part of the set for me.
Last thing I want to mention, along with sort of the new roster debut, this was also the debut of Tsukiyomi in the jungle. I think Panatom played it both in game 1 and game 2. What are you guys' first impressions on SPL's sort of Tsukiyomi?
I mean, it's one of those assassins that is just better in scrims. I think.
Sure.
I will say that he's really fun to watch. I don't think teams have really worked out where to pick him in a draft. I think everybody kind of knows his strengths by now. But his value is still a bit of a question mark. It seems so far, and I can give you like a bit of insight from scrims, he either does really well or really badly. So that just means there's still question marks and people need to figure him out a little bit more.
Sure.
Or that he should just be a late pick and has hard counters and things like that. Either way, he's a fun god to watch, so I'm happy he's in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say he is super counter pickable. Right. I think there's a just absolute swath of other junglers and other folks with hard CC, and Khepri is like one of his biggest counters, right? From like a Guardian perspective, you interrupt the 2, and then if he dumps his ult on somebody, you know they're going to take that damage, so you get basically a free Khepri ult.
Sure.
You don't have to time it at all or anything like that, but no, I think he's, like Rowe said, he's like this super counter pickable, fun to watch, but hit or miss character, which I think is good, right? Because in his previous iterations, he was a W key, kill your whole team, walk away, monster.
It's crazy that he got nerfed. What was it, like 12 times? 12 separate nerfs, and we're still seeing him in the SPL. So I'm very glad, happy for the balance team that they made those changes before the SPL. Otherwise, I think I would have hated last week.
So they here's just some like stats insight. Is he went from the number 1 most played top win rate in all modes and all levels of play, right? Like sometimes you get to like diamond and people know how to counter them. Top win rate, all modes, all levels of play. They nerfed him and he went to top win rate, top play, all modes, all levels of play. And they're like, oh, we got to hit him a little harder than that. And so that's when the big nerfs came out. And then he only dropped to like I think he was like 18 or 20 or something like that, which is still within the top 30 threshold of like, these are considered strong gods right now, which is cool to see, right?
Yeah.
I will say, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think as people learn to play against him a little bit more, he's gonna be. I mean, it's like Cthulhu, right? Like when Cthulhu came out first, you just don't know what to do.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And now you figure him out, you just turn on him and kill him, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's faster to learn to play him than it is to learn to play against him. So that's what I think we're gonna see, like the shift in the stats. And I think Cthulhu was the same thing. Very easy to play, but it takes a little bit longer to figure out how to play against him.
I think that's sort of his strength, though, is that me knowing how Tsukiyomi plays doesn't do me any favors, and we won't win against Tsukiyomi until the rest of my team knows how to deal with him. That's kind of why he's going to keep on stumping, like outside of the SPL. But as far as like Tsukiyomi jungle will obey, banned him like first and second all the games. They either value him or they don't know how to play against him. I'm not sure, but they've got some sort of feeling for Tsukiyomi. But
So
as
I
far
can
as like jungle goes,
I can actually answer that question because I asked Bobby about it.
go for it.
Yeah.
So the reason that Obey banned out Tsukiyomi was not because they, either feared him or valued him or anything like that. It's that they had not seen enough of it in competitive play from like a scrim perspective or anything like that for it to be a variable that they understood really well. And so they just took it off the table, right? If somebody had figured out really how to utilize it, if somebody had played it well and everybody else had learned from it, they weren't aware of it. And because it's a question mark, they wanted to eliminate the question mark, and they'd rather deal with what they know than try and understand what they don't on the fly.
Yeah, I thought it was smart as well because against Radiance especially, what ADC is going to pick up an assassin in the ADC lane?
Cyclone.
It's going to be Cyclone Spin, right? And they've been away for 3 weeks in this hyperbolic chamber doing God knows what. Tsukiyomi was out in the PTS. We saw him streaming it, or I think he was just talking about it in the Pro Discord. So I knew he was playing it at some point.
Yep.
And whether it was in jungle or in ADC, I don't know. But if there's an assassin, that can be played in the ADC role, and if there's anybody that's going to pick it up, it's Cyclone Spin. So I think it was kind of just a safe bet. I was also, talking about just touching on it briefly. Our set, I didn't know, maybe he would have picked it. We didn't ban Tsukiyomi, and we gave them the opportunity to take it. Doesn't look like he wanted it at all. He was first picking other gods, but if there was a person that was going to pick it in the ADC lane, would have been him. And talking about being comfortable and not knowing about that god and not being ready to face it, like Inbound might have said he was, then I think it's just much safer to just take away. You've got 3 bans, just take 2 and put Tsukiyomi on one of them.
All right, anything I missed in this set? United versus Sanguine. Any final thoughts you guys might have before we move on?
I just want to say, I think United is just a really fun team to watch. I think just like Obey right now as well, they're just getting let's say we talked about Wolfie Ra, Harwin Yanis, and Screams Bastet are just really fun things to watch. And it's good to have those niche picks in the league because, especially as a coach, it just makes adds another dimension to preparing for a team. So that's enjoyable.
Yeah.
Especially they're so laissez-faire. Snoop super known for being very laid back as a player, almost to the point where it's a detriment of, come on, Snoopy, you got to stick on a roll. You got to stay on a roll long enough for it to actually matter. You got Baskin, Gino, all these boys from the SML where the rumor has it, as the song goes, that they don't practice the most intense that they possibly could, but they do approach it with
school. They have a busy schedule, so they don't practice the most. And plus, SCG scrims are the most fun.
There, they do approach it with that more fun attitude, and I think whatever sort of psychological factor you can bring in with you, just to give you just a little more of a boost, I think they're going to have it, if anything.
Sure.
It's fair.
All right, moving on to Ghost versus SSG. This is sort of the battle of the Goliaths in the league, so to speak. I guess this is basically 1 and 2 in the standings coming into this week, if I'm correct.
I think so. I'm not sure. I definitely rate them up there personally. I don't pay too much attention to exact standings because I feel like behind the scenes the change pretty common. But I would definitely put them both in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, and we had 2 very quick games, I would say, in the beginning, with Ghost really pushing them hard in game 1 and SSG basically returning the favor in game 2. And then game 3 was sort of this really sort of back and forth affair that was quite long. What are your guys' first thoughts on this set, Ghost versus SSG? SSG did seem a little bit underwhelming. Anything that popped out to you guys?
Soul Lane. I'm a coach first of all, but as a Soul Laner, just the Soul Lane picks are really fun. I think with since Nike got nerfed, after the MSI patch, and Sundo got brought into the game that removes shields, we didn't really see much of Nike solo, but we've seen a bunch with FinoK now, and then Guan Yu as well, just buffed, and Nika's already pulling it out. So I think it was really entertaining for that lane specifically.
Juan is sleeper right now. That god's really good, and nobody's playing him.
God, Nika even said that he said on stream the buff was going to do nothing, that Guan Yu was useless. And look at him. Every time a pro goes, nah, that character's trash, I almost expect them to go for it.
Sure. What exactly were the Guan buffs? They're escaping my mind right now. Do you have them?
5 damage on his tick. That's
just
it. It's not really much. It's just to remind you. I'd say it's a small buff. My team disagrees with me. but it's not really. It just reminds you that God exists, and like, oh, they start think about it. It's like when a
Sure.
God gets a cool skin.
Yep.
Like, oh, I just want to play this in a scrim. It'll be fun, and then like, well, this is pretty good. That kind of thing. Yeah.
That is
it's just he's still Guan, really.
true.
Not much has changed. Itemization's about the same, but he sort of frags out. It's like when we played ranked. I don't know if he still plays anymore, but Daikaris, he was known as the Guan Yu main grandmaster all the time with this character, and it's just go cool down, team fights, dive the back line, then go back to your team, heal, press some twos, you got your ult back up, and that's exactly what Nika was doing the entire time. I don't know why we haven't seen it until now. Is that 5 extra damage really? Oh, that's what it was. That's what he's missing. They keep getting out with just a hair of health.
People kind of just didn't think about him. But realistically, if like let's go back where we missed all the red flags. Like Warrior's Blessing got changed, so it like tick damage is a lot better against Warrior's Blessing now. Berserker's got shield. Berserker's shield got changed. So Glad Shield. I'm trying to refer to, and Berserker's, I guess. So there's a lot less sustain. So like, Guan Yu didn't get affected by that and still stays in the conversation. It's just like everything around him is kind of like fallen away, and we didn't realize that Guan Yu was still sticking up there. But now he is. I don't think he's standing that tall. I think he's good. He's definitely a sleeper, but for sure we'll see more of him. Yeah. And it's funny that none of us are talking about the Nike pick as well, because she's so boring to watch. I just like the fact that there's more picks, but nobody likes to play against the Nike.
Well, I think we all know that, like, you just have to buy Sunder versus the Nike, right? Like, that's the big counterplay.
Well, yeah, you would think. I mean, apparently it's not that simple, but
I guess not. Yeah,
what it is.
I don't think anyone. Oh, they did buy Sunder in game 2, but in game 1, I don't think they bought Sunder into the Nike at all.
Game 1, they lost to it. Game 2, they bought Sunder and won. So I guess in theory, the math checks out. The evidence is there that Sunder will win against the Nike.
Sure. We've talked a little bit in the past on this show about banning out Dardes and it not really working too well. I think maybe this was the first example we saw of a team able to ban out Dardes pretty effectively. I know he stuck to Chang'e in game 1, was fortunate to get the Hera in game 2, but game 3 was stuck playing an Isis. I don't know if Isis is really the best god in the mid lane right now. What are your guys' thoughts on banning out Dardes as being an effective way to combat this SSG team?
I've always thought it was pretty questionable because, like, what people were banning his Afro and his Hera before, right? And they were banning it pretty much every game. And then he would end up on something like his Unha from last year or his AMC in like the same kind of vein. I'm sure he can play Neath as well. And then it's like, you don't really want to be banning an Afro, a Chang'e, Isis, and he's really good at those gods. It's like, should we even ban any of his gods at this point? Like, just let him play what he wants. He's probably going to make something out of nothing regardless. So let's direct the bans elsewhere where we think they'll be more effective. But in theory, well, in like, in I don't know what the word is, practicality. I don't know. In practice, you just ban gods that you don't want to face and like prepare for the other ones you think that you will face. I think we're starting to get a better read of what Dardes is playing. Whereas like before, you would ban Afro and Hera, like I said, and then he would be picking from this slew of like 8-9 gods. Now it seems like he's going towards more of a defensive mage type with Chang'e and Hera, with Chang'e and Isis. I think that might be because the mage ADCs have fallen off, so they need the magical damage instead of Dardes going on the hunters in mid.
I think he just enjoys being like on battle mages, essentially, where they're sustaining themselves while also outputting damage. Like Chang'e is that is poster girl for it all, but Hera, Christ, brings in a whole nother body. There's no diminishing returns on the 2 or the knockup or any of that, and Ghost for some reason just never hit the god dang ultimate. They never touch Argus, and then it turns into a disaster of a fight. But then they just figured, you know what, we'll ban it because it was the first game banned, went well. Second one, I think they try to experiment. Let's see what he's got. Is it really as scary as we remember? Did we forget how it was? No, it's still as scary as it is banned again in the next game.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like that you bring up the On Her and maybe some of these ADC mids. Is there a reason why you think SSG doesn't seem to go for Olorun in the mid lane? Because I feel like I'm looking through some of these picks and bans, and it seems like Olorun is open a lot, and we see other teams prioritize Olorun.
Yeah, like Persephone as well and things like that. I think they're just him and Twig. So just those games in general are just there's just some gods they don't play, and I think that's fair. I think every player should play their style, unless like there's some real OP stuff. I don't think you have to play it, and you have to just like pick those gods, even though you'll be better. Be doing better on other gods. So like I'm much rather see these mid laners be confident in their own picks and pick these like niche picks rather than go for the meta picks. It's way more entertaining to watch, and I think we're seeing higher level play as well instead of just seeing this like meta gods bash each other.
Sure. I don't know. You would think Oleron would kind of check all the boxes for Dardes, though, right? Like, basically a hunter, maybe. Also has an insane team fight ult. I don't know.
Trust me, as a coach, like they'll be like, "Wait, isn't this god right up your alley?" And they're like, "No, I don't want that." And so it's like, "All right, whatever." I don't think it's easy to read. Sure. I can't read my own players. Like I might think they have a style, and I'll be slightly wrong. And there's just some gods people don't play, and that's fair enough.
Yeah.
The biggest issue for that, like Hera and Chang'e compared to an Oleron, is he has no mobility outside of his ultimate. Whereas Chang'e, 1, 2, 3, super mobile. Hera makes plenty of space with her 2, and then the 3 is obnoxious with how often it comes up.
Yep.
But Olo relies on the ult, gets dove, and the ult dies.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're gonna see Dardes play Oleron, it's not going to be the Oleron we expect. It's going to be like a Blink Oleron or something like that. Like he brought Blink on her to the SPL as well. Like it's always going to be something different with him, and he'll make it work and make it like into a new meta as well. So maybe he just hasn't found that meta, that niche Oleron relic yet. Maybe he'll find it. We'll see. Or item.
Yeah, I'm expecting like a Zhong Kui mid out of him sooner than most other characters.
I don't want to see that just because I don't want to face that.
Anything else you guys want to mention about this set? I know we didn't talk too much about Ghost because I think Ghost sort of did what they game planned for in games 1 and 3. Is there something I'm missing with this Ghost squad? They're just looking like the top of the table here.
Yeah, I mean, also I think kind of just like at least game 1 and game 2 they kind of just played the same stuff as well. And did he play Hero all 3 games?
I think he played Hero all 3. Yeah.
All 3, but he got beads. He got beads first relic in the second game when he got run over.
Yeah. This is another example of like just Blink mids being like propelling a specific god to something extra. But yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of like quintessential them, so there wasn't much to comment on. It's something we've seen weeks before. It was just like, what is SSG's answer going to be to it?
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
Aside from that, Panic Cat looks like he's sort of found himself again. He was having some rough games, man. Some rough. Maybe his confidence went down after that one game where it was like 1 to 20, and he was the only one who died. Because then he had a few games where it went pretty rough, and now he's like he barely died at all in this set.
Yeah, he had a solid week for sure.
All right, then. Let's take a little break. I'm going to get some water here. We'll start up with Sanguine versus PK in just a little second, okay?
Sure.
All right, give me 2 seconds. Check my food.
I'm so upset because they didn't do the Hachi Hog strat. You don't really need mana pots or mix potions, so just get a second hog, rush down the Alpha Harpy.
People are getting pretty creative with it. Problem with, you can rush down the Alpha Harpy. It just guarantees you don't miss any minions, so it's not that big of an advantage. Might just get multi-bots instead and heal more. Or just, I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff you can go. I think people are getting pretty creative with Hog now in this whole. I guess we could have mentioned that for that set too.
Specifically though against Ghost, because God, if anybody's going to run you down for trying to do the Alpha Harpy, it's going to be PBM.
His PBM in the face, like he's just blinking over that wall straight at the Alpha Harpy.
You're not getting it.
Yeah. So next game, Sanguine PK.
Yeah, Sanguine
PK. This last one, I think it was just standard. Like Ghost has SSG's number and win a game, experiment, and then finish.
I was watching Raffer stream after the set, and he was just like, "Man, there's something about that team. We just can't play well into those players and into like their style of play, especially like I think SSG. When we've talked about this before on our show, they like." To farm it up a little bit and then wait for a team fight maybe a little bit later on in the game. So getting pressured out.
Playstyle wise, they're not quite in the advantage.
Yeah.
I think most typically struggle against teams that do something a little different. I mean, SSG a little different, but they're just like a slow different.
Yeah.
So you have time to prepare for it over the game. Whereas like some early, like think back to like Ghost losing to Armada last year, Like they lost to things that are just crazy early game that they aren't prepared for.
Sure.
But if you give them time to think, I think they're smart players. They'll figure it out over time, especially like PPM.
Yeah.
It pretty quickly figure out how to play against like a Chunga or ISIS and things like that.
I was really surprised with the ISIS. I thought it was like AMC for sure.
Yeah, I was surprised that it happened twice. So 2 different teams were okay with picking an ISIS.
Wait. I mean, she got
a
small buff.
ISIS?
She got the Guan buff as well. We saw a little bit of ISIS, behind the scenes when Cerberus was kind of running amok because it was like one of the better majors into Cerb. I think ISIS kind of had an upswing as well when Tsukiyomi came into the game because it's one of the better gods into Tsukiyomi as well. And it's just again like you get that reminder of like, look, I'll try this god. And then
then I remember why I don't play it.
Yeah, it's either that or like, oh, not bad. Yeah.
Wait, who else played ISIS this week? Frost.
Hurry.
Really?
Yeah.
Against the Bay, right?
United versus what was the first game?
The Bay, or was it?
No, freaking
Sanguine?
Sanguine, yeah, that's the one. It was game 1, the one they lost. I think his logic was he wanted Giannis, but he got second banned, so then it's just like ISIS because they didn't switch much.
Okay. All right, Sanguine versus PK. I think this is the first time we've seen PK finally win versus a top 4 team. I know we've talked about it a lot, but PK looks really remarkable in this set. Paul doing all sorts of Paul things. I think he got hell in the first game and then played set in the second game. What are your thoughts on PK finally winning versus the top team here?
Again, just the team finding their identity. I think that's what I think. I don't know. I was watching like the PK videos like months ago, or even just like up until a month ago, and they were just saying like once we find our identity, we'll be fine, because they were just struggling to find that. Just like every team, once they find what they do best and they do that thing, and they find what it's best against and ban the things that it's bad against, they do really well. I also think Sanguine, coming off a bad loss earlier in the week, it made PK have a lot more information draft-wise, so I think they got the upper hand in drafts. Not only because they play like these specific niche gods, like what Paul played, but also because they saw what Sanguine played the few days before or the day before. I will say just quickly that I didn't watch much of this game because I had a game the next day, so I was like hard preparing for that. But it looked pretty dominant from what I saw for sure.
Well, yeah, and especially Cuvo taking Tsukiyomi away from Panatome. I think Cuvo looked really.
He didn't even take it away because Panatome didn't go for it. You got Nemesis.
I guess that's
instead.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, like why is it that you went one game where you prioritize him, but then this one you're just like, maybe it's not as good. I got run down with it.
Cuvo looked fantastic on it.
They won game. Panatome won against United with it in game 1, and then I think he had a really bad KDA the next time. And some people, when they have really bad games, they're like, all right, I'm not picking that god for like 3 weeks. Just get me away from it.
Oh, okay. So
it might have been that like when he moved on to the next set, he's like, I can't do that right now.
It's more trauma than information. Like, that went kind of bad.
He grabbed his Nemesis teddy bear and stayed safe.
Okay.
So it reminds me of Zap during Worlds, where he played ISIS, I think, in the semifinals. I don't think he played ISIS for 3 months after that.
I figured some players are like, okay, that didn't go too well. I could maybe try it again. I'm not sure about the information. But others, it's like, maybe it's still good, but I don't care. It made me feel bad. I lost on it, so I'm not going to touch it.
So I love the Sanguine guys. I'm really happy they're in the league. I'm happy they're doing as well as they are. And, I talked about this earlier, about not taking away anything from winning teams. I thought the Knights looked great. I thought they executed well. But this was the first game where I really felt like Sanguine just played like shit. Like just straight, like I did not feel like they played at 40% of what they were capable of and showed us, and everything was sloppy. And the Knights obviously did what they should as a good team, take advantage of it and run away with it. But I thought Sanguine played extremely poorly relative to what we know that they're capable of.
Yeah, we've seen really high highs from Sanguine, so you would expect better things. But and it is just like giving credit to PK as well, because like I think, for example, like their preparation, like I said, they saw the day in advance what they played, and then like Paul picks Hell into Hera, which is a great matchup, and with Shinto being like one of Sanguine's like rocks where they need Shinto to do well as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Picking Hell into Hera, a great matchup. Picking Set into Thoth, even better matchup.
Yep.
I think they just had the real big upper hand in draft, and then you could say like Sanguine aren't playing well as well. But to their defense, I guess I'll play just devil's advocate and say like they had a set before, they were preparing for that set, whereas PK had been preparing for Sanguine the whole time. So that's just my coach perspective, or coach bias, really, just like giving preparation a bigger value. But yeah, I just think they had their number really well in draft and put pressure on the right spots as well. So that was really intelligent from PK. But credit to PK as well, just playing well more than just preparation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to. Go ahead, Frost. Go ahead.
No, feel free, depending on the tangent that you're going on.
I did want to maybe spend a little more time talking about the set, because at first it was set as in the god, not the set here.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. At first, the set mid was a bit of a gimmick. I think no one really thought it would be something that Paul would pull out on a more regular basis. But I think we've seen him play it right now in over like 3 or 4 weeks at this point. What is the set, especially in the mid lane, bring? I feel like this is something that we really are not seeing any mid laner other than Paul do right now. So why are they picking this set up?
Cthulhu.
Is that it?
They told you, he just goes underneath the hood and gives you a tune-up. You don't even know what's going down there.
I think it's just one of those mid gods. One of those assassins that can be played in mid, just as like I was talking about Tsukiyomi, it might be just one of those assassins that could be played in ADC. And then again, Paul, like Cycling Spin, is the guy that's going to bring assassins to their role, right? Yeah. Not many mid laners. Actually, I guess this goes back to like a point that I said before. Mid laners just have to have their own identity. Wolfie with the Ra and things like that. Shinto with like his quintessential meta picks with like Oleron, Merlin, still like one of the only people still playing Merlin. Yanis, like Horrorwind. I think just Paul has his gods, just like Dades has his gods. Like every mid laner just has their playstyle and their team. Like they're just like the puzzle piece that their team needs, and they form into that like perfect shape. I think Paul has really executed well in that regard with his like Hell and set picks this set.
Specifically though, like for assassins, I think some players do have this sort of like League of Legends factor where their mid laners are like they really dominate the pace of the game, especially in the center. Where here we have like that sort of 3v3 and all three of you kind of need to be on the same page for anything to happen. Like the mid laners can take solo fights and then they can ramp up and take on 1v2s. And it's generally on assassin type characters. I don't know what they call theirs, but to us they would be our assassins. And like Set, Tsukiyomi, they're sort of duelists. We've seen Horrorwind whipped out Wool in the mid. Okay, but he also went Susano in the mid. There's just some assassin type characters that are maybe you are not doing all the deeps for the entire team. You don't have big AoEs, but maybe you can just specifically with an Exacto blade take out this one character. And now you've diminished their DPS by taking out that character.
Sure.
Yeah, and as well, I mean, if there's an assassin that's going to be in the mid lane, it's probably going to be Set. Big line clear abilities, that's what you need in the mid lane. Like if you just take it all the way down to the foundation, that's what you need. So, and just on top of that, having a great matchup into Thoth. And again, I just want to put emphasis on the fact that, you know, abusing Shinto, which is like one of their crutches, was really important for them. And I think they identified that really well. And then, yeah, like I do agree with Wraith as well, as I don't think Sanguine played up to their potential. And we did mention before that they may have gone on a break during that that week of no SPL. So again, the difference between like long-term and short-term advantages of that when it comes to burnout comes into play. They didn't have a good week, and then maybe because of the week prior, but we may see them bounce back and reach a higher peak than they ever have. So
Sure.
I wouldn't count them out, but a lot of credit goes to PK for this set. And it's a momentum win as well for them because they, like Rongu said in his interview where they had never lost to PK, you're feeling good after finally beating them in a 2-0, a dominant 2-0 at that as well. So
yeah, I know I feel pretty validated now. Finally, my PK pick, is correct.
He did it. I just Sanguine to me never looks good cocky. To me, the Sanguine team that I root for is the kind of underdog, but also like very hungry. We can take this because we believe in ourselves, not this is free. You know, there are some teams that they go, this is free, and they actually just stomp you out. But to me, Sanguine going, this is free, is me thinking, maybe look at your notes, just maybe look at them a little more.
Have a little humility. You got stomped by United early this week, like
It's true. I mean, they're very easy to root for as well when Sanguine are really grinding out these wins, because like an international team, being an international player or coach myself, it's so easy to root for them in like an underdog way. So when they really like grind out these long game wins, playing just what they play and what they practice is really fun to see. But to see them like, I mean, if they did come into it cocky, that is just not good to see as well. They've reached peaks that would inflate anybody's ego, which is fair. But yeah, I like to see them humble, and I like all the guys in them. And we're so glad that they're in the league because they bring like so much more entertainment and so much more like personality. Just not even just like behind the scenes, like at them as people. I think they bring personality in the game as well, because it's been a long time since we've seen a team, and this is how I identify them. We've seen a team really just play meta picks all the time and just grind them out. Because if you see any of these players in ranked, they're playing what they play in SPL. They're not hiding their picks. They're just like, all right, we play this many picks. You can't ban them out. We're just going to play them and play them and play them, and we're never going to stop. And it's really cool to see a team just grind from the bottom all the way up. And that's literally what they've done as well. Coming from an international region all the way up to 1 point top of the league is super easy to root for. So I hope they get, come back and find their footing again. If the whole thing about them taking a break is true, then I would expect to see them bounce back, because you wouldn't expect any burnout. I just hope that these losses for them weren't demotivating much. Like it's never fun to lose, but you just gotta, like, surely that's just to kick up the ass and being like, okay, we have to try harder. Let's get back to what we've been doing, and let's like put on a show again. So I'm excited to see them in the coming weeks for sure.
Sure.
If you watch the docs though, like they are kind of emotional when it comes to losses. Like their processing seems a bit odd. Like phase 1, they won against Obey, and then Sino comes through, they lose, and they took that so hard because they're like, "Oh, we've beaten this team before. How is it that we lost?" Because there doesn't seem to be that string of logic to go. You just don't have enough information on this team. It's not the same Obey, right? In that instance, or it seems where we might have the ability to go, Radiance didn't practice for 3 weeks or this or that. Like not those things that take away from victories, but the like, okay, guys, let's just practice better next time. I feel like Sanguine takes it to heart. They don't have the ability to go, I was just having an off day. I think it just kind of really hits their identity.
Yeah. I think they really care about what other people think as well, because all eyes were on them when they joined the league, because everybody was talking smack. And then they reach the top, and then again, everyone's expecting great things. So they are under a good amount of pressure. But I'd say just sit back and wait and see what they see. I have no worries. I think they'll do well in the coming weeks, and if not in the coming weeks, then they'll do well later. I don't think we see that team just cracking and breaking down just from a couple losses. I would be really disappointed if so, because they've come so far.
Sure. All right, then on to what I would consider the game of the week, which is United versus Obey, another 3-game slugfest here, as it says on the Smite esports site. Really a back and forth set. I think we have to start with the game 1 backdoor. What you guys think? I think this is basically what Paul attempted to do maybe 4 weeks ago, but the United boys actually get to pull it off. I think the Ratatosker helped a lot in that.
I think that game was over. I mean, there's just no way you stop that, right? It's entertaining to watch, but that's exactly what you should be doing. You could have had the entirety of Obey standing on top of that Titan, and if all 3 of them come in like that, they're going to take it. There's just no way. Yeah, you could zone as much as you want. It just does not matter.
Right. It just would have been really disappointing to see them not do that. I think that's the important thing. Like, if they didn't do that, then they've done so much wrong.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think... Yeah, I mean, just for the set as a whole, I think Obey threw it. I think they looked really good. I mean, look at the game 2, right? I mean, they absolutely obliterated them.
Yeah, definitely.
Like standing still, obliterated them game 2. They had them figured out, and I think they threw the 3rd game. But no, I mean, the first game was really entertaining. It was fun to watch. It was good back and forth. United won with that, cool ending. And then I think Obey, bounced back really hard, and I think they had the opportunity to win and they didn't. And I think that, again, this is one of those weeks where it's like, okay, did United play really well or did Obey throw? And I felt like they kind of choked it on the third game. I think Wolfie and Sino in that third game were particularly underwhelming. But
it's also just, and again, I'll just put my coach bias in there. I think it was also really fun to see two teams that had already played previous in the week quickly adjust to what they think they're going to be facing based on what they've seen of the other team, just a day or two ago. I think that's really fun to see players adapt so quickly. But I think it's also important to make that, important point to make that we probably didn't see the best of either of those teams because it takes a lot more time than that to properly prepare. So I don't know where these teams stand based on each other. I think Wraith says Obey's winning if it's a best of 5 kind of thing, or if it's like a long week that they can prepare for each other. I just think it'll be really entertaining to see them with more preparation. I think they're really even right now. Two teams that have had roster changes, one that's grinded it out from the bottom and one that's fresh on a honeymoon phase. I think it's just a fun set to watch. Again, I didn't watch this one as much as I watched previous games in the week just because it was a day before I had SPL.
Sure.
So I had pretty busy, but yeah, again, United as well, a fun team to watch.
This one made me nervous. Jesus. Just because of the Arachne. He did that against Radiance, and Arachne always goes for the buff camp to put her webs down, and the enemy team just has to 4-man get rid of them. I guess he got a little too greedy, a little too emotional the first time around because he tried to stop them. What? As an Arachne level 1, he tried to stop 4 people. They dragged him down, and that was kind of atrocious. But they did end up winning that, so maybe that also goes, okay, even though I had a rough first time round, I can sort of be relevant late because he does pull out pressure. This is not. This doesn't seem stellar from Sino. This is not what you'd expect from a jungler of like, oh, he got your mage and he got your ADC and he's soloing people left and right. He's such a nuisance and he's getting the relics that he needs. He's probably dying for it, but the rest of the team's picking up for it. Sino's really. I think he's gonna start taking like another whip from the community. First time it was warrior supports. Now it's might be his Arachne creating pressure.
I think the community should lay off him as well. I think he should bring something unique to the team because I think that's what they needed. I don't think they needed just a jungler. I think they needed a lot more than that after what we saw out of phase 1. But I mean, not even Sino. Like the other players on the team stepped up tremendously. Some of those games. Like let's talk about game 2, Ducky. Was it game 2?
Yeah, it was game 2.
The Thor game, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they played Thor a couple times, I think. Yeah, I've never seen him play that well. And I don't disrespect Ducky at all. I think like I rate him pretty highly, but that game he played it super well, and I hope he's really proud of that as well because that would be like I would remember that as a player for a long time, and that would be like a motivation point. Might even just lock me Thor. I want to do that again, kind of thing.
That was actually going to be something I wanted to talk about because I obviously tweeted about it. I have said for speaking of just community perception, like I've said for a long time, and I at least since the beginning of last year that Ducky gets so. I think he just gets crushed in the power rankings for each role every single time, and I think it generally has to do with team performance and. I haven't been shy about, saying that I think Ducky's one of the better solo laners in the league. The guy goes 9-0-5 on Thor, solos Baskin twice, and has the game of his absolute life. He was dunking, he was peeling, he was initiating, he was chasing, he was cleaning up. I mean, like, he was everywhere, and it was, like, oppressive how he played. And I don't think it's because he was walking all over United or anything like that, but I thought Ducky had again one of the best games that he may ever have. But
his career,
it just goes to show you that like I think people have been kind of lumping him in with how his teams have performed the last 2 years, and I think I don't think he's gotten the fair amount of respect. They were talking about like, which solo laner should they bring into the league next year to get rid of Ducky? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You know what I mean? So anyway,
it's always strange to me, because like everyone enjoys the not the banter, but also the analytical side of esports. Everybody does. You got the casters, the commentators, the community. We're doing it right now, but severely lack the ability to sort of separate out different variables. How is it that like Ducky, being pretty much the same player, is only now regarded as being really well because they're winning? It's just too binary where the community goes, W, great player, L, player's trash.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's either that or honestly it just kind of plays to how much they enjoy the player, because you have the people who go, Barracuda's not played that well for quite some time. The people who still can regard him as being an amazing ADC despite how like it's just L after L after L, and then others who are just like, he makes me smile. Same for Ducky. The people who did like Ducky a lot are just like, yeah, he's adorable.
Yeah, I am glad that he doesn't get. I guess he does get disrespected in terms of just being lower, like rated lower. But like, I feel like he's just overlooked more often than not, rather than like disrespected. I don't think you'll find many people that talk about Ducky and say like, oh, he's just bad. They'll just be like, oh, he's just Ducky kind of thing. They just overlook him because they don't like read into what exactly he's doing. He's definitely one of the more interesting players when it comes to being a solo laner. He isn't the best laner. Like some people are just like way more oppressive in lane. And that's just because he doesn't play a lot of those gods. But you can see on a god that he's comfortable with, and a matchup that he's comfortable with, like this Thor, he can be oppressive, like very oppressive. And he didn't just carry that game like in like one portion of the game. Like it was from the beginning to the very, very end that he was just carrying all the way. And that's really impressive, really impressive to see. Like was it 9-0 and 5? That just goes to show that like he didn't miss a step the entire time. And that's for him, again, a game to be proud of.
Yeah, I just also want to point out, I think maybe solo lane is probably the deepest it's been in the SPL, you know, compared to maybe some of the other positions in terms of the quality of players on all the teams. I think, you know, especially now with Bastion coming back into the solo lane, basically every team has a pretty stellar solo laner at this point. So, you know.
I could agree with that as well. And I think some of the solo lane changes kind of bridge the gap. I think last year, like one playstyle was better than the other, and players can't necessarily change playstyles that easily. So when you make multiple playstyles just as good as each other, they all start to shine in their own right. And finally, people are getting the respect they deserve, like Ducky.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think it's too tight in the power rankings because let's just pick on like support or something where it'll go, here's the 8 players, but the bottom 2 are just like shouldn't be in the league. That's just a hypothetical. Whereas in solo, it's like here's the 8 players, and all of these are the 8 best solo laners. Like there would be no trading out. I think that's just kind of where Ducky falls, just by nature of there's a lot of really talented solo laners.
I mean, even last year, right? I mean, you got 10 teams in the league, and then you add Deathwalker and Divios to that mix, right? Like, that's still right. 10 heavily deep. Like very talented.
Now,
I mean, that role is stacked.
Yeah, even outside of the SPL as well. I think Haddix, and I'll mention Solo Troll as well, even though obviously we did kick him off the team. I think he's a fantastic player. Like the talent in that role goes way past just the SPL as well. It goes deeper than that. I don't know too much about like the EU side of things because we've been away from this for so long, but the NA in that role is absolutely stacked. I think, they all have their different values, and when playstyles are all just as relevant as each other, I think it just becomes a great entertaining role to watch, even though I'm biased because I like the role.
Sure.
Why are you all fighting for like the best Thor? There's Solo Troll, there's Ducky, there's Fine OK. Did anybody else play it? I swear I've seen like one more Thor.
I think I've probably seen Nika play it. Variety's played it.
I think most of the solo laners have played it at least once. I even think Scary D has played it once.
Everybody wants to have like the best Thor in the solo lane.
It's a flashy god, and it all comes down to
well.
Like it's not much to do with the god when it comes to winning. It's just how you play it mechanically, and that makes Ducky's performance more impressive because most people wouldn't consider him to be just like this mechanical god, but he showed that he can be in that game.
I also think it comes down to like a little bit of like macro play there. Like in the Radiance set, he got completely stomped out by Benji. Like that first tower was gone almost instantly. But that makes it so that he can farm back and rotate to his own team fights way faster than Couture lane. So it's just like his understanding of the character to the point where he's still in a game, even when he's technically behind, but it's a favorable outcome for him. I think Ducky's shown that he does have insane understanding of the character as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else before we move on to the last set of the week?
Nothing from me.
Sounds good. The last set of the week this week was Radiance versus the Renegades, and glad we have Rowe on deck to break this one down because it was also Variety's debut for your team. Maybe let's start us off, Rowe, talk about how Variety has been coming on to this squad, just replacing one person and having to bring Variety in. How has that been? Has that been a smooth transition so far?
Has been, yeah. It's been really, really good. I guess I'll start from the beginning, or at least the beginning of like when we started to make changes, just to give people some context because I know a lot of people have question marks.
Sure.
I think Harrowin did, like talking about the United situation, I think Harrowin did a good job releasing that twin longer. If you haven't read it, go read it. And just explaining a lot of backstory. I don't think I'll give that much detail because I don't want to air any dirty laundry and start drama or whatever. But we obviously got to the point where we weren't happy with Solo on the team, Solo or Troll that is. For reasons I'll keep behind the scenes. But I will say, like I said in the interview I had with Agro last week, that he has his merits. He's very strong in certain areas, just not the areas we needed. And I think he made a few mistakes throughout the year that he shouldn't have made. He'll grow up a lot from the whole thing, and just I don't want people to think he got kicked because he was bad, because that's not why he got kicked. Just like I mentioned with the Solo lane having a deep pool of good players, he is in that pool for sure. And I hope to see him back as well, because when we were having a fun time on the team, he's a good kid and he deserves better. But what happened, and we got to the point where we needed to replace him. We trialed a couple of options, and eventually, obviously, Variety was one of those options. We decided on Variety. I will say, and this takes nothing away from Variety, that it was a close call. I think, again, there's just so much talent in that role. But we needed Variety for certain reasons, and that's just like confidence, leadership, and well, those are the most two for sure. And just me not having to worry about his play at all. I've never had to like look at Variety and say like, oh my god, he's playing bad this week. I've never seen him that way. I think just throughout the seasons, because I was in EU or on an EU team before I came to NA, I always highly respected him, especially sitting in the community center watching him, taking down Dimmy in like the finals, even though they lost that set, was huge. So he's not a player I have to watch out for. So it was a safe pickup in that regard. But I know he has high peaks, just like we saw in that like World Championship. And it's
we all knew it was coming, though, right? Like,
it was closer than people think. That's for sure.
What were the other options?
I'm not gonna share the other options.
You're not gonna tell them I was the second guest.
There's no way.
Dang.
There's no way it was that close.
Trust me, look, after more practice I've had with Variety, I'm just getting happier and happier that I picked them up. That's how well it's going, right? People think
it was that close.
I mean, it was pretty close. Like I guess I'm putting some like arbitrary numbers on it, but like let's just say there were 3-4 options. It was like 60-40, some people 60-40 for another person. And eventually like the math checked out on Variety, and people wanted him the most for reasons that I won't disclose, like just because it gives too much insight to our team, not because it's like bad reasons.
So
because he 4v1'd Barra. Right there.
I thought it was an obvious decision, right? Somebody with obvious, extreme SPL experience, a reputation for consistency, has gone all the way, right, and lost, right? But like,
in the end, that's why we picked him up, because it's consistency and we don't have to worry about him. But there's a lot of talent in the solo lane that are unproven, and they might have really high peaks. Like, let's bring Jake into the conversation. Not that he's a solo laner, or he has played solo before, but like nobody respected him before he came into the league. Everybody thought it was a question mark. Everybody wrote off our team, but now everybody thinks Jake is one of the best players on our team, and that's because he is. These players need time to prove themselves, and there are players in every role that could be really, really SPL worthy with the right leadership and just a chance.
Sure.
So why can't you tell us who else you were looking at?
Well, I think it just devalues those other people. Like, I guess maybe it's a compliment to say it was close for them.
I would 100% say it's a compliment.
In the role, in the role where it's considered like fully stacked with talent to even go, we were thinking about him. I think other teams would go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just from an esports show perspective.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm still
that
not going to
says, like, keep an eye out for these guys. Like,
I just think keep an eye out for this whole lane, honestly. Just like or like when a rookie comes from the solo lane, actually just screw it. When a rookie comes from anywhere, like stop questioning it as much as you have been at community, because there are some really like bright diamonds that just need some leadership down there.
Sure.
I felt that way about Guy J, and I was really sad to see him
I think
go.
people still think he's really good as well. I was sad to see him go, but we'll see him back, just like we'll see Solo or Troll back.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing Variety back, obviously. Anyway, back to Variety. Yeah, I mean, just perfect fit for what we needed, and a safe bet as well. I just don't have to be concerned about him whatsoever, and it's so much fun having him on the team. He's a fun guy to hang around. You know, met him many times throughout the years.
Sure.
And I think the most fun bringing a new person to the team has been like another person seeing how good Jake is behind the scenes and seeing how funny he is, because like Jake will do something good in game and Variety will say like, holy shit, Jake, that was incredible, you're a beast. Like, and it's just fun to see, and Jake will just go, like he's just like an awkward kid and it's funny.
Yeah.
It's just been really fun to show another person Jake behind the scenes.
Sure.
Because he's incredible, and just like Variety did super well in his set this week as well, which I guess we'll talk about.
Yeah, just one more question about signing Variety. And correct me if I'm wrong, was Variety on that Dignitas team when Lasbra was their...
Yeah, sub?
Their sub, yeah.
And I think they may have lived together on
or very close to each other or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, they were close.
Him and Cuvo and Laz and everybody that was in the house together.
I think he was there at one point for a couple months from Australia, so
yeah.
That was again one of the merits to picking up Variety as well. It seemed a safer bet with Lasbra. I think Lasbra has a high peak, so having someone that enables Lasbra more is a good option as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that fully.
Yeah. And I forgot what I was going to say other than that.
That's okay. The only other point that I wanted to really make about this set, other than, Variety looking pretty stellar in his debut here and Renegades winning the set, is that we're sort of seeing the rustiness of Radiance coming off of basically 3 weeks of not playing Smite here, losing to both United and Renegades. I mean, I don't want to demean you guys or anything, but I know I did not expect, certainly, you guys to take the set going up against Radiance. Is that, how do you go into some of these sets going up against teams where, maybe the outcome isn't as sort of like surely in your favor, Yeah,
when we're the underdogs. That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I've been an underdog since I started because I was an Australian player, right? So it's nothing new to me. It was a little bit different on Energy because they were the 2-time world champs and everything, but I was still very new to coaching, so I felt like I was an underdog in that regard too. I don't know. I prepare for every team the same way. It was a little bit more difficult for Radiance because I only had one recent set to go off of, but I was really glad that I wasn't in Obey's position where they had like 3 weeks of nothing to go off of. So I was glad that Obey had played them, and not only played them, but taken the 3 games as well. So I think taking a lot from that set, especially if they hadn't been scrimming much or at all, if people are saying that, like I just got to basically see exactly what they were going to do, and it was easy to prepare for in that regard. And we just ended up playing our own game. We had a lot to prove. We had Variety for 1 week because we signed him Friday night, just over a week before the SPL set. And by the way, that was close as well. It wasn't just a close pick between solo laners. It was close to signing him. I think we got him to sign the contract about 15 minutes before the deadline.
Yeah.
Because there was just like complicated, it takes time to get a contract together. And when it was a close decision, there's only a couple hours to get a contract. People had to work fast. And thankfully, shout out to Renegades, they worked fast this time and got it done. So we were glad to have him. But yeah, we just prepared for them as we would prepare for any other team. I think I had less information, but more like packed in valuable information because it just was a couple days prior. And if they hadn't been practiced, then you would assume what they had practiced, what they had played a couple of days prior was what they were going to play again. So I just had that to prepare for. But before we saw them play, we just prepared in our own way, double scrimmed every day, trying to find our own comfort because we're changing our identity with Variety on the team as well. So I think you'll see our play adapt and maybe do even better than what we did against Radiance because we definitely didn't have our best showing. There was a lot of mistakes. Game 3, for example, I thought was in the bag until 17 minutes, where someone decided to call a fire giant and drag it out to 40 something minutes, and then it became a 50-50. Like literally, I was like 15 minutes into that game 3, like sitting back in my chair, happy with one. There's no way we can lose this. And then 2 minutes later, I'm like, all right, it's back to a 50-50. We either win or we lose, and there's nothing I can do about it. My job was done as a coach at that point. So it was a stressful time.
You want to call him out here, Rowe? Who made the call on the 15-minute fire giant?
Jake put the idea out there, and then I will put the blame on everybody except Barra, because Barra wasn't there and didn't have any input.
Sure.
Everyone was like, yeah, we can do this. Okay, I'll use my abilities. Okay, and then they're like, oh, we lost it. And I'm like, all right, great.
Yeah, there's no way that's a Barra call. I've played
Barra wasn't there.
Way too many games with him. Like, almost every time I look at the Gold Fury, he's like, "Oh, you are the most NA objective player I've ever seen."
I mean, I agree with Barra. Take the safe bet. There's no reason to risk that from ahead, especially on a game 3 like that where everybody's watching. Yeah, I wasn't happy to see it, but is what it is. We learn from those, hopefully.
Sure. Any final thoughts on this set? Go ahead, Wraith.
I was just say I love watching Lasber win.
Yeah.
I got real close with him over the time he spent here, and he's one of those players. Like, I know when he wins, he plays better, he works harder, things like that, and it's great to see the team win, but it's definitely like always good to see Laz play well. He's starting to develop some consistency. I think in past weeks it might have been a bit of a problem, but
I will say that was part of our reason for the roster change as well. It didn't feel like Lasber was having to bend too many ways, and the change was for Lasber and pretty much every other player as well, to really bring out their potential. It wasn't so much because of solo; it was more because of, I mean, it links like in weird ways behind the scenes that I can't get into, but I think we'll see better things out of him because of the roster change as well. And you're right.
Oh, sure.
Him winning will make him a better player the next week, just because I think he is a momentum guy, and winning motivates him more than what constantly losing was. So
sure. All right, it's time for us to make Week 9 picks. Let's start with the first game of next week, which is Ghost versus Sanguine. Wraith, let's start with you. Ghost versus Sanguine. Who you got?
Ghost Gaming. Sanguine look like crap. I don't think they're going to bounce back that quickly. Highly emotional team. I think the last week's going to weigh on them. And I think Ghosts are looking pretty consistent and pretty spiffy after that win against Space Station.
2-0?
All day long. 2-0.
Right.
Not even close. 2-0, right. sub 30 minutes each.
Unless they're trolling, right?
Unless they're trolling.
All right, Rowe, let's go to you. Ghost versus Sanguine.
I'm going to say Ghost as well. I agree with a lot of Wraithen's reasonings, but I think 2-1. I think game 2 win from Sanguine. I think it's one, Ghost, Sanguine, Ghost. I just think Sanguine hopefully can bounce back. I just want to see a better set out of them, because I think they owe it to themselves as well. But again, I think Ghost is going to win. I don't think Sanguine will bounce back enough, but I do think they'll do a little bit better than what they did last week.
Sure. Rowe says that the Ghost Boys are going to troll Frost. What do you think?
Oh, they're definitely going to troll, that's for sure. But I think it's going to be 2-0 Ghost. I think there's just way too much information for Sanguine. The Ghost is one of the more cerebral teams to be playing this, especially like Slaney. And just all the coaches are incredibly cerebral about it, except some are more about like the discipline aspect, whereas these are more think outside the box. And there's not much thinking outside the box to be done left with Sanguine. They're just way too consistent for their own good.
Sure.
So 2-0 Ghost. They are going to troll, but I still think they win.
Yeah. I remember when we had Slaney on our show, he seemed to think that the Ghost Boys were in a bit of a rut, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. It kind of looks like they've come out of that rut and are sort of back on top, and everything is firing at the same time. So I got Ghost to win this one as well, 2-0. All right, then. Let's move on to the next set of the week, which is Radiance versus Space Station Gaming. Started with Wraith first last time, so let's start with you, Rowe. Radiance versus Space Station. Who do you got in this one?
It comes down to Dades, I think. I think Space Station 2-1. Radiance, again, same with bouncing back, just like Sanguine. I don't think Radiance are going to bounce back fast enough. I hope they're practicing really hard this week, but I think Space Station just have a deeper book right now than what Radiance might have. So 2-1, again, for Space Station this time. but I don't think any of the games will be super dominant. I think hopefully all of them will be close. Maybe not long, but generally close for the early games at least.
Yep. Sounds good. All right, Frost. Radiance versus Space Station Gaming. Who you got?
2-0 Space Station. Space Station has like a sort of playstyle that is really punishing against players who have a high risk. And if we fall out of step even a smidgen, we get punished for it severely. So I think Space Station is just going to win by default of playstyles 2-0.
Sure. All right. Last but not least, well, I guess I'm last. Wraithen, who you got? Radiance versus Space Station Gaming.
Oh, man, I voted for Space Station here, and I think it's going to be probably a 2-1. But part of me, and that's what I'm going to go with, but part of me feels like the Radiance guys, strike me as the kind of players where like you get like pissed off for greatness. You know what I mean? Where you lose, you take it really hard, and makes you come out 10 times as fired up the next time. There are teams that go down when you lose, and like, you get into a rut like Ghost. I think Radiance is just knowing the personality is probably the opposite. So I think we could see them coming out and surprising the hell out of everybody, but my gut is a 2-1 from Space Station.
Yeah, I tend to agree with all you guys here, especially considering what we saw from Radiance last week. And we know that Space Station has basically been at the top of the league for the entirety of this whole season. So I'll give it to Space Station 2-1 as well. All right, moving right along, we have Rowe's team Renegades playing E-United. Let's start with Frost here on this one. Renegades versus E-United. Frost, who you got?
God, this is a rough one because like I love Barra, I love Baskin.
And I'm right here.
Yeah, and you're here too, looking at me. And there's a bit more tenure though on Renegades. I think this is one of those games where I give it to like an old school ranked match. That's what's gonna happen in this set. But I think it's gonna come out all three games 2-1 Renegades.
Okay, Wraithen, let's move on to you. Renegades versus E-United. This is basically the variety revenge tour, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I think it's Renegades 2-0 and a fast 2-0. Going back to the whole like how do players play when they're pissed.
Mm-hmm.
I could see Harry taking this one to the house.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. I think this is going to be ugly.
Mm.
And I hope it is because it's a good storyline. But no, yeah, I think Renegades 2-0. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Sure. All right, on to you, Rowe. I'm sure you're going to give your boys the 2-0 here.
Yeah.
But are there any other thoughts that you have about this set?
Yeah, I mean, try to remove like my bias from it. We've beaten the United every time.
Yeah.
Like we should, in theory, beat them again. I think we have an advantage having Harry from that team. So I think that's again another advantage. Add on my confidence as a coach in my own team. It's a 2-0. I think, or I hope it's as dominant as Wraithen hopes it is as well.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great for a storyline. But yeah, obviously, I'm going to vote for the 2-0 for sure.
Sure, yeah. This one seems to be like almost the match of the week for me. Especially with all the narratives that are happening between these two teams. So I'm excited to see a good set. I also agree with you guys. I think it's going to be Renegade taking this one. I don't know. You guys are looking really good this past week and making me feel good about it. So
I think Jake's going to eat Gino alive, honestly. Mm-hmm. Like they're both, prior to the SPL, they were both sort of like be on the lookout for these supports in the SML. Mm-hmm. But now Jake's had the advantage of actually having being reinforced into the SPL. He's just got the experience now.
Sure.
Yep.
All right, moving right along. We got PK versus Obey in the fourth set of the week. I think we got to start with you here, Wraithen, on this one. PK versus Obey. Who you got?
Obey 2-1.
Oh, it's kind of an upset, isn't it?
I'm going hard. I create content with the Knights. Streamer. I love those guys, but I've been extremely consistent about my rooting for the underdogs in Obey. I think they have got the momentum. I think they are a very momentum-driven team. Mm-hmm. I think their mood, I've seen these guys after their games come over to the house for dinner or whatever, and their mood changes so drastically for the entire week after they play, from when they do well and when they don't. And I think they're going to keep this momentum rolling. I think they're getting into the groove that they want to get into. And I think, when you got this like battle of the middle and things are starting to shake up and they're doing well and they stomp Radiance, I think we're going to see. Some great play out of them, or they're going to lay a wet fart. It's going to be terrible.
You said 2-1, right, Wraith?
2-1. Yep.
2-1 Obey. All right, Rowe. How about you? PK versus Obey.
I'm going to give 2-1 the other way. I'm going to give 2-1 to PK, my ex-team, or ex-organization, I should say. I think there's the potential they read Obey as hard as they read Sanguine, and we saw how dominant that was. But I think, Obey have a lot of time, again, being one of the teams that practices one of the hardest in the league, double scrimming all the time. They have a lot of games to prepare or cook up something new. I think United read Obey pretty well, and hopefully they'll learn those lessons from that and bring something new that Knights aren't ready for. So take that one game. But I think Knights are smart enough, just based on last week, that they can read ahead of time and be prepared for a decent amount of what Obey could bring out and prepare well for that, and just take those wins pretty convincingly. I'm going to vote 2-1 and kind of like an odd vote. I'm going to say 2 really dominant games from PK and 1 really dominant game from Obey, and they probably won't have any close games.
All right, let's wrap it up with you here, Frost. PK versus Obey.
Yeah, it's very similar to my logic. In a 2-1, it's going to be Knights with the 2, Obey with the 1, because even though I think Obey is capable of punching up, Knights have this sort of like this ego that's around them, this aura of ego against teams that they in their heads go, yeah, this is easy. They kick them. They kick them hard. Other teams, like we mentioned Sanguine, once they get cocky, they sort of fall apart. But Knights is one of those, we got this in the bag. And I feel like they still have that sort of disrespect for Obey. And I think they're going to kick hard, especially Paul.
Sure. I think that aura that you're talking about, Frost, is called swagger. And we know my boy Zap is full of the swagger. So I'm going to give it to PK 2-0 this week. Because I love Zap. And Zap's got some swagger. So let's give it to PK. All right, moving on to Ghost versus Radiance. I think we're on you, Rowe, to start us off here. Ghost versus Radiance. Who you got?
I think this is the toughest one of the week, honestly.
Yeah.
Damn, I wish I could answer this after we see both of them play on Saturday, but
I'll be changing my vote based on the.
I think me too. I think right now, I honestly think
Friday.
It's a 50-50. Yeah, I honestly think it's a 50-50. But I would probably say Ghost, just based on what we've seen from Ghost last week and what we've seen of Radiance last week. That's all the evidence I have to back it up. My opinion may change in one way or the other. But right now, I'd say Ghost and a 2-1, just because I think it's so close. I think Ghost would take it unless Radiance bounce back hard on Saturday. So we'll see.
Sure. Frost, how about you? Ghost versus Radiance.
Ghost with Radiance, it's it really is going to come down to how they play against Space Station. So this is kind of rough without that extra information, but I think it could look to be a 2-1. This is still one of those teams where Ghost will take a win, then the second game is information, or the troll game, if you will, and then finish it off clean. So 2-1 Ghost.
All right, Wraithen, I think I haven't gotten to you on this one yet. Ghost versus Radiance.
This is going to come down entirely to how Radiance play against Space Station. I think if they come off a win against Space Station, then they 2-1 Ghost. I think if they lose to Space Station, they might just implode, and then we see a 2-0 Ghost way. But I mean, my instinct is I think like we talked about earlier with my Space Station versus Radiance pick. I don't think they've had enough time to kind of come back and practice, but maybe this past week has been good for them. I think Ghost takes it 2-0. I think Radiance lose to Space Station, and are going to be taking that loss pretty hard.
All right, Ghost 2-0 for Wraithen. Man, I'm also conflicted about this one. It's 2 strong teams, except one is sort of coming off of maybe 3 weeks of not playing. I think that basically tilts me in the favor of Ghost here. So I'll give it to Ghost. A lot of people have been sort of flaming us, or maybe flaming me for picking 2-1s. I know some of the pros see our picks and they're like, there's so many 2-1s, but I think we've been validated because last week there's a bunch of 3-game sets. So I'll go 2-1 Ghost here in the Ghost vs. Radiance set.
But then they'll get mad at us if we say 2-0.
Yeah, they will.
There's no winning with them.
You can never win.
Dude, I'm just waiting for the DM from somebody from PK that's like, what are you doing?
All right,
I do vote against them. Hey, I want them to win, but
Sure. All right, last game of next week, week 9, Sanguine versus Obey. This is sort of like basically where we started this whole season, I feel like, was Sanguine versus Obey. So now we're coming right back to it in week 9 here. I think I have to start with you, Frost. Sanguine versus Obey, who you got?
Well, I did predict that they'd take a spanking at the start of the week, or start of the weekend. And I think it's a lose-lose. Either they are taking it kind of easy right now to avoid burnout and make a stellar performance for playoffs, or they're not. They're in a rut, and that loss is not going to go well for them. On top of, they might feel a little cocky still against Obey. So I think this is going to be 2-0 for Obey, and I think it's going to be a very clean performance.
Sure. Wraithen, I can already guess that you're probably picking Obey in this one, but
I am indeed, sir. 2-0. I think Sanguine lose hard to Ghost, as I mentioned earlier, and I think out of every team, they take it the hardest, and I think Obey capitalize on that.
Sounds good. Finish us up here, Rowe. Sanguine versus Obey. Who you got?
I expect better from Sanguine than what the others do, but I still don't think they win. But I think, I'll be boring and say it's a 2-1 in Obey's favor. I think Obey are riding the momentum, whereas Sanguine's much the opposite. It is unfortunate for Obey that they have to go back-to-back. I think they're playing 2 days in a row.
Yeah, they're playing PK on Saturday and Sanguine on Sunday. Yep. So
I think that does hurt. It takes away time to practice. Not time to practice, but time to prepare. But I still think they win, just because they're both momentum-based teams, and one's going one way, the other's going the other. So 2-1 for Obey.
Yeah, this does also feel like a coin flip. It feels like a lot of these games, especially in the second half of this phase, are starting to feel like coin flips. I guess that speaks to the parity of the league so far. Man, I really don't know who to pick here. Let's just go Sanguine 2-1. You know, I think it could go either way. It could go Obey 2-1. It could go Obey 2-0. It could go Sanguine 2-0 as far as I'm concerned.
Coward.
Hey, I'll commit to Sanguine 2-1, but I'll just say that it could go anyway. And I'm not sure.
That'll be a game to watch.
Definitely
That'll be a really good one.
I really think it's just volatile right now because of attitudes of who's hungry, who's feeling a bit burnt out, who's got new teammates that they need to go kind of all out for and fit together. And if right now is going to be the most unsteady part, or the second most. The most unsteady is at the start, then this middle bit. Once we get over this hump going into the playoffs, that's when everybody's going to be firing off. Well, it depends. I know some teams are more like, you know what, we already kind of are seeded in. We don't have anything to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I think everybody wants to win playoffs. There's a decent amount of money on the line, and I think everybody just wants to prove themselves just before Worlds. So we'll see what happens.
All right, last thing I wanted to touch on for sure before we head off here is, seems like an appropriate time maybe to relook at the team power rankings for our league here. So I don't know, maybe we'll just have a general discussion and maybe see where we can slot the teams. So I'll start off at the top. Who do you guys think basically is at the top of the league right now? Is it Ghost number 1, and then maybe SSG and some other teams? Where are the power rankings falling for you guys?
I'll speak up and say I think this is the worst week to do this. After last week, I think everybody everywhere. I think regardless of where you put people, it's squished together.
Sure.
So it's really, really hard to say, especially after a short break. Maybe a couple of weeks people will start to distance themselves, but right now I think we were saying it all last year or earlier this year, the league has never been more competitive, but seriously, it does feel that way.
Yeah.
I would actually recommend waiting a week to do this. I'm not kidding. Not just because I got to go pull my food.
I'd wait a few more, honestly.
At least a week.
The last time we did power rankings was like week 3, so like this seemed kind of.
But that was a good time, because they kind of went into their own and kept with it. But this one right now, I think we just caught them at a bad time. Right now,
roster changes.
Like even now, if you were to tell me who won, who would be my number 1, I could put Radiance, Ghost, and SSG there, and even then I still wouldn't go, that's definitely the number 1. We're talking, these 3 will shift, and even none of them I'd be as impressed as I was before.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, that's a good point to make. I guess I'll save the power ranking discussion for next week. There's always next week to ask about it.
It's the same. It's same for the bottom teams too, where before it'd be like, oh, these three, but now they're all kicking upwards.
Yep.
So the last thing I do want to give at least Wraith and Frost some time for here is, since we have Rowe, are there any questions you have for him specifically about the league or anything we didn't really touch on so far?
Yeah, can you coach individual players, or is it just more of a team thing that you do?
I don't have the time for that. You mean individual
damn it,
players
Rowe.
outside of the team? I'm
Coach
sorry, man.
more
I'm
support.
trying to get good here, man.
Good,
I've
man.
been playing ranked every week. I'm almost in Masters.
I've coached for the Knights before and ended up playing, man. It didn't go well. I can't coach for a Knights person again. That's
wow.
I love the Knights.
That's grand.
What about you, Frost? Any questions?
Coach the supports. Yeah. Well, what would you say? Like, we could stay away from the politics and also from like the background stuff. But what's the biggest similarities that you were happy Variety had with Solo or Troll, and what was like the more differences there? Because I heard your interview with Aggro, and from watching both players, I just go sort of like Variety's kind of like Solo or Troll, but with a beard.
Yeah, I mean, there are some similarities. In terms of like god picks and playstyles, I think Variety has the upper hand and just having more hands in more pots, or whatever the saying is. He just has a wider pool. I think Solo is like really good at this specific stuff, and and even in some regards unbeatable compared to other solo laners at that stuff, to his credit. But it wasn't what we needed. Whereas Variety just has that wider pool, but also has the parts from Solo or Troll that we needed to keep. So it just made too much sense to switch. We're really happy we did. No offense to Solo or Troll, and we'll see him back again. I'm sure. Solo, he's whether we see him, run it up through SML somehow, make it to Worlds, or we see him next year. Either way, if he stays motivated and keeps playing, we'll see him again for sure.
Yeah, we need to find more support talent somewhere. That's where it's running dry. Dual lane in general. There's plenty of junglers, solo laners, even mid laners, but dual lane, something about it. We just can't find them.
I had a question about Variety as well here. You talked a little bit about some of the leadership that he brings, but from sort of the community and fan perspective, Harry is a bit of a quieter personality. Can you maybe illuminate a little bit what sort of leadership qualities he brings to the table?
Yeah, I think he's quiet sometimes, quiet not other. I'm sure you've had a few drinks with Harry in your time around.
I have,
sometimes he's not quiet at all. So
sure.
Those are the times that we're really winning, it seems. I'll give like a shout out to like Horrorwinds Twitlonger as well, where the changes they made was because they needed leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Harry isn't just leadership in a package. Like, he isn't just like, okay, we've got Harry, now we have leadership. It's not that simple. That's what they got with Baskin for their United roster change.
Sure.
It's not what we needed. I think the problems that their team had with Harry were not relevant at all to our problems at all. So I got all the best parts of Harry, and they were missing. Like, they didn't value Harry in ways that we do. So I just think I can't give too much insight of the structure of our team, so it's hard to answer the question. But trust me, he fits well.
Sure.
I think for the playstyles, it seems like United wants more of like a fearless leader will follow you wherever, whereas Variety is more of like I've got one in a headlock, I've got the other one here, you could do this if you want to, sort of like he's doing his own thing, and in that way he is leading, but he's also just kind of making room, and then someone else can sort of delegate or do something off of that, whereas a United is just we need somebody to
it's a good
tell us where to go.
Honestly. It's a good. I won't say it's completely accurate, because it wouldn't be fully true and gives away too much, but that is a pretty good observation. I agree. Yeah.
Making them sweat. I'm on to them.
Just do me a favor and make sure somebody's recording, the room during your United Renegade set.
That's a good idea. It's a good idea.
If you want to borrow a camera, I can make that happen. I'm not even kidding. I'll give you the tripod too.
We'll see what Harry wants. He doesn't like being.
That is not like, I just want to see Harry just throw his 6'10" frame into the air and be like, "Fuck off, you dickheads!" And just run him down and kill them all.
I will say he deserves it. That's for sure.
See, that is the biggest shame. He is by far like one of the biggest personalities for the pros, but he's never on camera. I remember those Knights videos that Sensei used to make. It's always
he's
Variety's yelling, subtitled. I'll go cookies in my mouth.
Yeah. There's the Dignitas videos. Yeah,
the
Dignitas funny moments. If you guys haven't seen them, go back and YouTube search Dignitas funny moments because they're hilarious. He can be a funny guy and a very very vocal guy. Yeah. Fortunately, his vocals work well with our team, so I'm happy.
All right, that's good. Thanks for watching the SPL Rundown this week. Be sure to catch us every week on twitch.tv/SmiteGame at 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. And we have extended cuts of all of our past episodes on our YouTube channel, which is APAM Productions. If you want to give me any ideas for future guests or future guest analysts and pro interviews, please give me a DM on APAM2 on Twitter or at APAM Productions on Twitter. Finally, please subscribe to the APAM Productions YouTube for extended cuts of my discussions with these analysts, as well as extended cuts of my interviews with pro players. I know there's an hour-long interview that I did with Zap that just went up last week, so be sure to check all those things out. And we'll see you guys here at the same time next week. Thanks a lot. Bye.